it's all good. And we supposed to see here some views. At the moment, 0. Okay, but
Very exciting.
it's usually like this. Don't worry. That's why I said
All right.
consider it a pair programming session, because
Very
no,
nice.
sometimes there are people, but usually a lot of there are views after. Okay, I've just seen that where was it? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Where there?
So it works.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, as usual, every Friday, 3 o'clock, we stream some contribution to Wave Design System. Today we have Jonah, our colleague from Hamburg, um, to work on it, and Jonah is one of the maintainers of the Wave code base, so knows a lot. And I think he actually did the select component, no? The
Oh, that's a
one.
good question. I think it could be. It's been a long time. But yeah, we have a very interesting issue today. Looking at an empty
Yeah.
state. It's actually one we migrated to the open source project back from when it was still internal. When the issue is that by default, selects don't have a default option or something to unselect your selected value. And we want to basically enable that for our design systems so they can, so the users can actually, well, unselect an option. Looks a bit like this. So by default, let me quickly open the Wave documentation, where by default you have select, there we go. By default, you only have the options that are basically in the list, and it usually pre-selects the first one. So yeah, that's something we'll have to figure out today, how we can make this work and enable the users to have this non-option basically. And yeah, I guess that's what we have planned today.
Yeah, and the question that arrives from my side is, I definitely recall this discussion like a year or so ago about whether the select component can be kind of reset to its blank stage, and we did a research actually about how it works in different design systems, because in native HTML it is kind of not intended behavior to have a select resettable, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There's no option to unselect something once you've selected something.
So what do you think? How should we approach this? Should we do this at all?
I guess there's a reason for it. If we take a look at the select list component, which is the more advanced version of it, once it loads, we also have a clear option in here where we can remove an element. I think at least. Unfortunately, we don't have an example, but for this component, you have the option. Oh, there we go. We have the option to, if I remember correctly, to actually remove it. Because this is actually a use case for quite a couple of places. I know for some projects that I'm working in is that you have a select list to select an option, but you also have the option to remove that selected option. For example, assigning a category to something or assigning a certain label. You'd be able to add a label and also remove it. So yeah, I would say that's definitely something we can do. Of course, not everything has to match the standard spec of HTML, especially considering that it's relatively old, so to speak. So I guess what we want to do is to make our designers be as efficient in designing great user experiences and our developers being able to implement them as well.
But speaking
What's
of,
your stake on this?
yeah, I'm trying to kind of elaborate on this idea, and there are a lot of questions that pops up implementation-wise. How do we want to tackle this? I don't know. In general, the select sounds. I mean, it sounds okay to have to be able to unselect something, but it definitely should not be a default case. Probably because
Yeah,
I
that
think
makes sense to me.
the core principle that we agreed when we started the design system is to be as close to HTML kind of spec if as we can, and this is something really on top. So, and yeah, plus we're breaking the current API if we are going to do this. But in general, yeah, I see use cases of that. Maybe not in the projects I'm currently working on, but for sure, like different CRMs, that it's gonna be handy for sure. And the kind of the questions that arise about an implementation details. So we want to make it easier easy for a developer to add. How do you see the API? Because to me, the core question is the translations, and so how would we address this kind of, because the naive approach, I would say, is to have a kind of Boolean attribute to a component, like something like clearable. So you can clear the value, but then what is the value of this component? What should we write there? How should we translate, and all of this kind of things?
Exactly. That's a really good question, and I don't think there is an easy answer for it. Thinking about generally APIs, that we try to avoid breaking changes so that projects can easily upgrade to new versions, use new components without having to do any big migrations. So in this case, I guess the closest approach to getting an extra would be to just add an extra option, right? So taking a look at the example, you would have something like an option. We're going to say select mode of transport. And that would now appear. And you would be able to basically have one select option that's the default. But the problem also with this is that it looks exactly like an option and it behaves like an option. So it would be something different. You could, for example, think about making this a prop and always adding, if the prop is set, of course, like a Boolean, always adding something like this extra option for users to select. And then with some trickery, maybe setting the value to null or something similar, being able to give it a different style to know that the null option is selected.
Yeah.
You could, for example, instead of using the Boolean, you could, for example, set something like null option or something, and then you can give it a name and a value. Something like select mode of transport, and a value is null. And with this information, we can easily add this this new option inside of this list and being able to act on it. Do you have some other ideas?
I'm thinking how developers use it, how they do this at the moment. If you need an option value, so this null value, how do they do this? Are they just add this null value by themselves and then reset it manually, This is the way I would do this probably if there was.
Yeah, exactly. That's also how I've heard people use it. So they would add another option with a value of null or um, something even akin to having an option that says unselect. So when you were to or remove in that case, and once you've selected something, it will appear, and once you click on it, it will remove itself, which I guess is also a bit strange for a user perspective or a user flow.
Yeah, yeah. And so what we want from our side is, okay, if we have the name of this component, we can show it and we want to style it. So to show that this is a default way. But do we really want to style it? I mean, maybe in this PR I would just do a simple approach, just having it there and concentrate, because I don't know, we don't have styles for this state at the moment. We can of course use something like text week or something like that, but I'm not sure how good the built-in select for styling. I bet that it has probably a very limited capacity for that.
That's true. It has very limited capacity. So for this field, you can basically just specify the text, and that's about it. You can mark things as disabled, I think, and then we will show up as this. And I think you can group them in specific groups. But I think what is probably more interesting is if we're looking at this option, we have a different style for this null option. Basically, it will look like it's a placeholder
When it's
so to speak.
okay, when it's selected, you mean?
Exactly, and I think that kind of makes sense, and that's something we can probably also implement in this pull request already. But of course,
Yeah.
when you take a look at the HTML styles, you can't really change anything there.
Yeah.
That's all we get.
Okay, so that means I'm also thinking, because when user provides a label and we asked him to also provide the value for this label, for this name of this option, isn't it always kind of a label or similar to a label in a sense? Like if we have, for example, here in the playground city, and we need to select scooter ride or taxi, that means probably for null option you'll do select city or something.
Right. So I guess we should probably rename this mode of transport or something similar. So it kind of makes sense. That kind of also leaves us with a question on how do we deal with translations.
Yeah.
So if the user doesn't specify anything, we'll have to assume translations. So we can, of course, provide the English ones, but that again opens up a whole another question. So tools of being half translated, some features being in English, some in their local language. In my opinion, it probably makes the most sense if we just specify or let the user specify the name of this null option. Now that I was thinking about it, we don't have a placeholder, right? Or do we?
I think the default one is just an empty string or something, because there is no placeholder in native HTML, I think, select.
Exactly. I think it always selects the first option by default, right?
Yeah, I think so. So that then makes sense to have this default null option. I was also thinking maybe the best way to, from the API perspective, is to have this one, let's say, placeholder option, and then you can say like this is the label of it. And if you don't provide it, there is no a way to unselect that was already, if you select something already.
Okay, so basically something like a placeholder option that acts as a placeholder, and when you add it, it will create an option that will say this label text option, and it will have the value that you provided, and then you basically can always go back to the select mode of transport and unselect it in a way, basically selecting the placeholder. And this is the children. Yeah, I'm not sure how to do comments here, but anything below here is the children that are passed into the select, and this option is something we add once the placeholder option is set.
Yeah.
And this one we can also style, right?
Yeah. Do you think it makes sense to ask for a value from a developer, or it always should be null?
I see there is potential for value being useful. I guess null is a very, very good default. But imagine if there are actually values that are null. If you say, for example, it's not mode of transport, but there is none, and it has the value of null, and then there is, I don't know, 1, and it has the value of 1. Something like that could be the case, and I'd rather be explicit about it and let users specify the value of the placeholder, because you need to specify something. Otherwise, you'll have very interesting consequences or side effects that you might not be aware of. But you're right. Maybe we can have this value as an optional and default it to null. I guess that's very expected from developers.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe on top of that, maybe it's like a further kind of enhancement. But maybe it makes sense to check if the provided options contains a null and raise a warning or so. So if there is this clash of values, the default one and something that is user provided, we can at least raise a warning saying like,
that makes sense.
You said the null.
Exactly. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Good idea to make the users aware of it. We can probably also do this just on general. So if you specify a placeholder option with any value and it is in the values that the user has provided, we can probably also check that. Maybe not in this pull request, but definitely as an enhancement for the future.
And what do you think if, for example, placeholder option can be both an object if you want to provide a value, or a string if you want to just provide a string with keeping the value default?
Yeah, that sounds good. So we just select mode of transport. I guess I was just thinking about just removing the option from it and just calling it placeholder. But that always implies that you can always unselect something, which might not be intended.
Yeah, that was also my kind of question when we decided to go with placeholder option, because it does not really convey this information that you can unselect something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe empty option.
I guess one other thing that I was thinking about is specifying a disabled here. So in this object where you can say, hey, this is disabled, so it will be disabled.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can show it though, because as you just saw, it switched to none. That's something we'd have to dig into, right? Otherwise, then.
Yeah. So it's not.
Sense.
Yeah. So that means if it's enabled, we select it by default, and if it is, yeah, I think it's like we need to listen to an open event or like, and then disable it at that moment. But yeah, makes some additional effort for sure.
Yeah, let's see if we want to implement this.
Yeah, let's
You
do
were
it.
also
Let's go
just
with
talking
this.
about the. Yeah, you were also just talking about another name for placeholder option, right? Empty option, was it?
Yeah, but I don't. It's kind of does. This option does two things. Yeah, being a placeholder and uh, being selectable. I don't know. Maybe let's go with the placeholder option and then we decide.
All right. Yeah, we can have another discussion in the pull request as well and see how people feel about it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I can take a look
Sounds good.
for another example in some UI library. So what is your approach? How do you want to tackle this? Now when
Well,
we
I
have.
guess I like the approach of having this placeholder value, also being able to just set a string to have it a bit shorter. We would definitely need to document this, and well, I guess the rest is doable in code, right? I can open the IDE in the background, and then we can get started, right?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, just let me open the presentation mode, just as we practiced, and hopefully the font size is still big enough.
I'm looking at the Chakra UI at the moment, and they have this placeholder option. You can provide a string to show this kind of default value, and they use HTML, vanilla HTML select component for that. What else do they have? Just kind of bring in some examples and what we can consider. So yeah, this is what
The
they
component
do.
is just called select as well, right?
Yeah.
Well, whenever my browser says it's ready.
And maybe something else.
Okay, they just have a placeholder basically, which implies that it's selectable.
Yeah, yeah. And for example, for Google, how GitHub Primer, is it the name?
Yeah, it's Primer. You can find it on primer.style.
Okay, nice, because DuckDuckGo is not the best in search. Okay, development, React. Let's see what they have. Drop down, this is what they call it. No, they don't have anything, but they have very custom approach to this component.
Okay, so I was just looking at the select from the Chakra UI, and they basically send an empty string for the placeholder when you select it, which is also interesting. I guess, to be honest, I would also be fine with just going with a placeholder
Yep.
and just a string for now, and then we just define null as kind of the default. And if we see the need arise that there is null in the actual options and people are having issues with it, we can extend the placeholder to contain an object where you can specify the label and a value.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna take a look through the specs of the select. Maybe there is something we can be useful for us. Okay. They do not specify anything of whether the value should be of a type string or something, but maybe I'm wrong, but in HTML attributes, aren't everything is a string? So if we set attribute null, does it mean it's a null string?
That's a good question. I guess that's why Chakra UI also says an empty string. But since our components are only used in React, that could be something we can definitely add into the description.
What font do you use for your ID?
It's called Pragmata Pro. It's very condensed, kind of in the horizontal direction. And it took me a while to get used to it, but now I don't want to go back because everything fits on your screen. And of course, it has like ligatures and everything, making it look a bit nicer.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did now, just kind of to start with, is update the playground example with the label and the placeholder so we can take a look at it, how it looks. And at the moment, it doesn't look very different from what we had previously, just with the placeholder. I can give it a bigger width if I can type. And then we can get basically to coding, right?
Yep.
So we were in the select TSX because it's a TypeScript component. And cool, it only has a couple of props. Just let me see if I can open the project from this view as well. Ah, fantastic. I still have to get used to this presentation mode because everything's huge.
I don't know. After I share constantly because I have a kind of strange screen that if I share something, it's really small for people, and I'm used to this presentation mode. And I don't know. I find it sometimes even clearer than the the regular mode in IDE.
Oh, wow. Okay, maybe it's just something to get used to. All right, I guess we're currently in the, what is it? The select input, the actual input of the component. So it's the HTML select element. Pretty cool. So I was thinking, since we have the bottom lined and the boxed variant, we can probably put this in these props of the actual select element, which contains the wrapper as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So because we will have to adjust this, how this select input is actually opened. So I'd probably just add a new comment saying, what do we want to do? Set a placeholder for the select component, allowing users to remove their selection.
Just to make a step back. So this select component, it contains of several like smaller components, usually styled, and the select.tsx is the main component that contains a wrapper, icons, input, and the label. But where is the option? Where are the options? Are they in the select input?
Yeah, that is a little bit hidden. So the options, if you take a look at how the component is actually used, the options are the children of this select component.
True.
So when you try and access them, they will be in props.children. And any props that we don't have, what we didn't destructure yet, which is the class name, the margin, and the width props, looking at the style system props, we also take out the label, and anything else goes to the actual input. So what this basically does is we can maybe expand this a little bit and say children, and then actually call it rest and rename this to rest without label. And of course, names are subjective and we'll probably find better ones. But what I'm doing now is taking the children out of the remaining props and putting everything else still in rest. So this will still work, but I'm now going to open up this select input and put the children in here. So now it should work exactly the same, except that we don't pass the children to the object directly, but write them out. And hopefully everything still looks the same. So if we refresh this page, the playground with the options should still look normal. And the options should still be propagated. So everything still works as it should at the moment. And that's kind of where the children came from. The input is really just styles added to the select. Style select creates a native HTML element with the select type and puts all the styles on it, adds many styles to it, and then just exports it again so we can use it here and pass the props. All right. Thanks again for kind of backing up. I might. It's my first time streaming for the design system, so I might jump a few things.
Actually, it was not for viewers. It was not. It was for me because I was like, "What the heck? Where are the options?" And yeah, obviously when you said children, it clicked. But yeah.
Yeah, cool. Some components in the design system are. I mean, you don't need to specify them like this. So before that, you would have the rest just in the select props. And that's kind of the beauty of having inputs very close to HTML spec. You don't need a lot of messing around with what or how to pass children around or how to pass actually the props around because they're just in the props, right? And you just pass them to the required component. Cool. So we just added a new type, which is pretty cool. It doesn't do anything yet, but you can specify a placeholder with the type string, just as you can with a label, and of course it's marked as optional. So up next, I guess we already did that part of extracting the children and the label, which we could probably do in one step now that I think about it. Let's just say children here. And save ourselves some trouble, and then we have extracted the label and the children from the remaining props that are not part of the style system props. So I think what we can do now is check if we have a placeholder, which we can also extract here from the remaining props, because we don't need to pass that on to the search select input. And then very basically, if we have a placeholder and I think we can just do this check, that makes sense. If we have a placeholder defined, we add an option with a placeholder as the text and a value of null. And if we don't have it defined, we just return null in this kind of coalescing if statement. So what we did now is just add an option before all the other children in the select input, which should of course be at the top then, which adds this additional option.
Okay, let's hope
specified in
it's there.
Oh, great, it's not there. That could be because my computer is very slow at the moment and it hasn't refreshed yet, or it hasn't rebuilt yet. Just give it a second.
It just Gatsby. I think we discussed how slow it is.
Yeah, sometimes it's a bit slower. Sometimes it's okay. It's never really fast. I remember the time when we still had to, where we're still parsing all the props from all the elements. So it was super slow because it had to parse all the props from the icons as well. But we did improvements, so it's actually tolerable now. Okay, so far so good. So with this code, you basically get 4 options instead of 3 now. One being the select mode of transport, the placeholder that we just passed, and the rest being still the regular options.
Question here. What do you think is inside this HTML option value attribute now?
Of the select mode for transportation, or?
Yeah.
Let's just check. I'm not sure if you can see.
Oh, they are all empty.
But it says nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing if we add an on.
Yeah, I'm just reading the spec. So if there is no value provided, the value is the text between the option open and closing tag.
All right. Yeah, so that makes sense for Scooter, for example. That totally works. Okay, so it selects mode of transport. Cool, something new learned. I'm guessing Chakra UI is not so wrong after all by providing an empty string. What do you think? Should we just do the same?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, definitely.
Sounds so like it's very close to the spec then as well.
Yeah, so in case nothing is selected, I think in most of the cases that would be just the value would not be collected or sent by, for example, if you do Axios or form data, I think it kind of skips some values. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so in here it basically works just like the Chakra UI of just sending an empty string to the target value. If we mention that in the documentation, I guess people can react on it since we can't send null. Technically we could, but I don't think that's worth it. Just thinking about what if we give this one a random ID and check on the onChange handler and everything, but let's not go there. Let's just send an empty string and make sure the documentation is aware.
Yeah. Do you still want to? I'm thinking because we're now kind of on the crossroad. We can write some tests, or we can add this ability to set the value for the empty string for the empty option. What do you think is the best step now? Or you think we're not done?
Oh, I think technically we're done. We just need to make sure that we have the text gray, like the placeholder gray. But apart from that, I think we should probably go ahead and write a test as well. Okay. I'm not sure if it makes sense to specify a different value for now. As you just mentioned as well earlier, that we want to stay close to the spec of HTML, and it doesn't allow setting null. So for example, even if we were to say a value null, I'd assume that when you select scooter, it would send still scooter.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm thinking that that's not because I think that's because they React. Because React, if you set null, means you want to skip this option, this attribute.
Exactly. It will just not pass it on to the component.
Yeah,
But
I
I'm
think
also not sure how you would set null in HTML, right?
I think you cannot.
Exactly. I think so too.
I think it's kind of a good default value. And if it's an agreement and we state it in the documentation, there is no need to really say change it unless something is really not usual and we get a request or we see this in the code base that people set their own custom value. But in general, you can always check on change. If it's empty, set your custom. So there is enough flexibility.
Right. I guess when you also want to use it, you can wait, was it when you have a like your component here, and doing like a simple JavaScript check if it exists, an empty string is equal to false. So when you would have your select here with an option and call that test, and you have a placeholder, and you handle your change on the onChange, it would basically happen something like if e target value alert value selected, else value removed. I guess this would work with the implementation that we currently have, right?
Yeah.
Where an empty string is equal to false because of JavaScript. But of course, we should mention that in the documentation as well.
Yeah, for sure. So let's drop some tests to verify and jump in the documentation and
yeah, sounds good. So I guess that would be more or less a general test. And then should render an empty placeholder option when set. Yeah, I guess we would just render our select list with a placeholder option. I'll call it just placeholder. And then we have probably one option.
Realized,
that says
that the stream hasn't started. Or it started in this thing, but it hasn't started on the YouTube. Fuck.
Oh, really?
Wait. It's strange because I totally seen the thing, and I see one viewer. I think I just posted the wrong link. So
I wonder who's viewing. At least Daniel found it.
No, he's saying like yeah, we're on YouTube. All good. I just update.
Really? For me, it says the live event will begin in a few moments.
Yeah, I know, because the wrong URL, I think. So I'm posting it here, and this one should work. Yeah, this one is live.
All right. Perfect.
I was, this
That would
moment
have
when
been a
you
lot of
fucked
time.
up.
That's all right. That's all right. No worries.
It is still recorded, so
Cool.
I would post it afterwards.
That's good. Great. Where were we? Right, we were writing a test, checking that the placeholder functionality works properly. And what we just did now is add the select, add placeholder, and we can give it a label. Let's just call it select. And I guess what we would probably want to do is set the default value to 1. Give this the value of 1. So by default, the test 1 is selected. And I would just basically copy and paste what we have here. So we would select an option, which is the placeholder value, which we've defined here, which is not in the options. And we would assume that it's clickable. And then it should hopefully be selected, and it should have called the function. So that's also something we can check by adding a jest function. Just go on
Do you think... you want to... Okay. You want to also check kind of the implementation detail here.
Yeah, I think I think that makes sense when we have this test already, when we try and see if it's selected. Maybe we have to rephrase the test a bit.
Yeah, let's write it and then rephrase. No?
Okay, let's do that. Cool. Basically, we would go for a user event, select options, and then we would get our select option, which we can get with a screen get by role, a combo box. I can specify the name as well, and our select. Lazy me, just copying values. No, and then we wanna have the empty value, because I'm afraid we can't select the actual placeholder by text. And then we would first of all expect that the screen get by label text, so the actual select, has the, basically just as in line 21, to have display value. But this time it's actually the placeholder. So that's what we're going with.
I'm also now thinking, why do we select the same thing twice, like in two different ways? Why we do this in line 33 by role, and the next step is we select the same but by label? I mean, we probably want to check a label, but I think the previous test check it, and I'm wondering why we went this way previously. So
that's a very good question. I think it should work like this as well. I think we will have to ask. I think Luca wrote this one. No, Alexis wrote this one. Maybe we can check with him later and see if there was a reason, or we find out ourselves in just a moment.
I think
so that's kind of the first.
How the testing library at least defines the priority between those queries they suggest to use, is the role is kind of the main one that should be used, and then you can, like, if role does not work or there is no role, you can go kind of into details, but here I see kind of value in both things. But I don't know. Let's leave the one that you think is appropriate, and let's just try to run it.
Yeah, you said it. Let's try to run it and see if it actually does anything, or if it starts crashing or not working. So hopefully it works, but it should. So we have the placeholder now set, and it should be looking like a placeholder, or it doesn't look like a placeholder yet, but it's at least the first option. While this is running, oh great, it passed. Amazing. So this seems to have worked. I guess the second one we wanted to check is that it also sends the value an empty string. You can probably also do with expect on change mock. To have been called with. And now just wondering if we can replicate the whole event object, or if there is a way to fetch ourselves one value from it. Because now
That's
it
a good
expects, of
question.
course, the... That is a very good question. I don't have an answer for it yet.
But even though we can provide partial or even the whole object, they're going to be different objects, no? Can we do on change mock and we can...
Oh, sorry, can we do what?
So on change mock, we can do, I think, on the line 36, we can do .history .something. So we can get a list of calls from there. We can first check that it has been called, then we can get the call parameters and compare those. I think this is how it can be done. Maybe I missed.
I think we can access the arguments, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably the first argument. Target value to... Oh no, it's to be equal, right? Or to be?
I think it's either to be or to equal, but I think in that case they're both the same because we compare primitives.
To equal sounds right. Yeah, it's funny. Every testing framework does it differently, and especially when you compare front end and back end, and things just start getting a bit weird.
Yeah, Jest is like, I cannot say that it's like a framework that I don't like, but the mocks part, it's like the most obscure thing in the world. It's like if you need to mock a module, every time I Google, every time I need an hour to set up like the simplest mock. I don't know, maybe it's my issue, but I never wrote it
no, you're not alone
from
with
the
it.
beginning. I'm taking a look at those mock functions API just to check. We need to do, we actually need to do, so the mock, just a sec, dot calls. This is how we get those. And I think we need mock.calls, and that returns the call argument. So an array of arrays. Yeah. This is it.
Right. An array of arrays.
Yeah.
We probably have to go with like this.
Yeah. Then.
All right. Maybe we should annotate that with a comment so we don't forget why that exists. Well, that makes sense. Well, of course, now that you think about it, just accessing arguments doesn't make a lot of sense because the function could have been called more than once.
I hope
it's
it will
the thing
work.
when you present that you forget the most basic things. All right. Test failed. Cannot read property value of null. So the target is null at least.
Yeah, maybe let's log the calls.
What the calls actually says. I know, JavaScript has the debugger keyword as well, but debugging feels like something for backend.
Yeah, I remember when I coded in Java after university, I did a lot of step-by-step debugging, and after I switched to frontend, I did this as well in browser or in IDE. Like here in test, I would debug for sure. But now the more the time pass, the less I touch this step-by-step debugger.
Oh man. All right, so far so
there.
good. Apparently it's there. So we have a 0 and 0.
And the target is there.
And it also has a target, which is weird. Let's say maybe there are some special things that are not there for some reason. True. I mean, for the backend, debugging is also so much easier than in the front end. You usually just have one API call and the request comes in, and then you can walk through it, and then it's easy going, right?
Yeah.
Right. So technically, target should be accessible. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, also like debugging on the front end, that means it's kind of, you can debug in development mode, but as long as you ship the minified code, that means you need to have source maps somewhere, and it's just the whole bunch of things that makes it complicated.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. Yeah, I mean, if you have source maps at least, that's a good start. So that's null. That's very unfortunate.
What if we say, I'm thinking, because it's the synthetic event, what if this empty string got kind of processed somehow?
Oh, I mean, we could just extract it here, right?
Yeah.
It's not the prettiest, but now the onChange mock should be called with a value. Then we don't have to go into the getting our mocks set up. We could just go change mock to have been called with. That's a really good point that you bring up here. So now the onChange mock is basically getting the value already, because that's only what we really care about. And then we can just check it normally. Cool. So let's hope this works now, so we can focus a bit on documentation and actually making the placeholder a light gray.
Then a question just popped up. Like, do you think we need to check this on change handler? Because what we do is just a native HTML, and there is no logic behind it.
Yeah, that's true. There's no logic behind the onChange handler, and we don't want to test that specifically. But I would argue it makes sense to check if the placeholder has actually been selected. I mean, right, we do it already with the get label, get the display value. So technically, no, it's probably not necessary. What do you think?
Yeah, when you said this, now I'm also considering that, okay, it's not strictly necessary, but in this test, it conveys this idea that the default value of this placeholder is an empty string. So in that case,
Right, that
it,
makes a ton of sense. This is actually something we specify in our component, this empty string.
yeah, so let's skip it and style the thing.
All right, sounds good. Tests work. That's great to see. So when we go back to this this placeholder, I think now now we need some CSS guru help here, because what we want to do is, I guess, style the select input, so this component, based on the value that's outside, right?
I think I know, I have an idea how to try. We can do, for example, ampersand square brackets value equal empty string. And then we do style.
So if we just set it to, let's just say it to blue violet, because that's very apparent. It should be this bluish violet color. I was thinking something very similar, but I honestly wasn't sure if that's going to work.
Me neither. It's like we don't like Gatsby a lot because it renders slowly, but it makes this kind of interesting pause when you do a fix and you like wait a second. This kind of moment when you think whether it works or not.
So
Okay, now,
unfortunately, that's still
yeah.
black. Custom select starts with pure CSS. Great. That's
Does it mean that there is selected value, I think, attribute for option, no? At least
so it would be something like
that's,
selected value.
yeah, with big V. At least this is the name of the attribute you can provide to the select. Wait, no, 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 no. No, no, no. Maybe I'm wrong. Just a sec. Opening. Attributes. Disabled for multiple required size. There is no value. It's the value is provided by the selected attribute in the option.
Okay. It must be possible, right? Style value based on.
I think we need two pair of square brackets. First selected, and then value equals empty. And we need to pass to select an option inside of this thingy. So like ampersand probably bigger than option and this two square brackets. I feel like I'm doing some magic here, like
Something like this.
No, no, no. That way we're gonna style the option, but we want to style the select. Okay, I think we need more magic. It should be some pseudo attribute or something. Because I think there is has. I'm
just trying out some weird things from the internet. Stack Overflow to the rescue. I think there is never a state where a developer or a front-end engineer knows all the CSS things, all the tricky things. Of course, it didn't work. There's always something you have to Google.
Yeah, what I want to pass to you, I don't know where. If you Google MDN has CSS pseudo class, I think that we can try to use the one below.
That's the first one?
The second one.
This one, right?
And this is the first example you see. We select only links that has image inside. So this is kind of...
So OP has...
And this option value, I think selected. But let's do this one step. Yeah, if there is an option, if there is a placeholder, it should be purple.
All right, I'm afraid it's not going to be purple for everyone, for every option.
I think it should be purple for everything, but let's see.
Yeah, I think so too. Isn't purple for none of them?
Yeah, I think, shall we do this? Yeah, this is exactly what we can try. Actually, this has is barely is not supported by anybody.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I'm afraid the
But how, for example, Chakra UI, they do have this.
That's true. Maybe we can get inspired.
But we always
open source, right?
Yeah, we always can do like a JavaScript way of styling. Since we're using styled components, we can pass value.
That's true.
Or read value, but I would prefer to probably be CSS styled if possible.
Yeah, same. Let's see how it's done here. So we have the select package. Cool. Everything from source.
No placeholder. Oh, here we go.
There we go. It's an option, just like we did. It looks very familiar.
Yeah.
So it's just the chakra select that's... And that comes from the system, right? So this maybe even... somewhere else, right?
Maybe it's yeah, monorepo.
Yeah. There we go. System. Source. Oh. It's not here either.
Meanwhile, I'll take a look at it from the inspector.
Yeah, maybe you can find something. That is a huge library.
Yeah, it is big. I was I don't know, maybe a month ago, I took a look at the IBM Carbon design system, and it was so good. The documentation and the design and the like accessibility disclaimers and how to use it. I was so surprised because usually, at least in my head, IBM is kind of this old-fashioned company that I do not expect a lot, to be honest. But I really was surprised of the quality.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, I'm now. Oh, I've opened the chakra select component, and I don't see the placeholder being grayish.
Oh yeah, true. Cool. So they don't do it either.
It sounds like an interesting thing to tackle. Yeah.
It's definitely a challenge.
And it's easily solved with the styled component. This we both understand, yeah.
Yeah. You can easily just pass the value to the input and then just check.
Answer from 2017. Unfortunately, this is something not currently possible with only CSS. But do we? Yeah. Oh, yeah. People do different stuff, which is more or less styled component way. Like they pass data variables, yeah, create this kind of value attribute manually for select and then use it, which is actually kind of the same.
Yeah, I guess the easiest way, if we just do go with styled components, it would be, I think it has the value even. Let me say pink or green. I think those two colors exist. So I guess if it's not possible to do it with CSS, we can also just do it with styled components and just deal with it that way.
Okay, let's see some pink. Okay, I definitely see green.
At least. And it's green everywhere. Amazing.
So that means the value is undefined, probably, no? Select
I'm assuming,
input.
yeah. So what we could do is just pass the value.
But my question is then, I don't think, do we have the value prop for the select?
No, that's a good point. It's not called value, I think.
I don't think there is anything, because in native HTML select, there is no value attribute. There is only in each option that is selected, you have this selected attribute.
All right.
So
I guess the value is only a React thing.
shall we do the
We don't have
styles?
access to it.
I mean, we don't, because this is Okay, let's do P. Yeah. I don't think
Yeah, I'm wondering
there is
where it is, right? Of course, the console is gonna explode now because there are so many selects on this page. But there should be some props for this input, right? Anything you pass to it anyway. Right, just no value.
What if you provide value? For example, in this select mode of transport, if you do value something.
So in here,
Like scooter.
kind of hard to see because it doesn't oh, wait, it does. Yeah, it's, of course it's passed then. So that goes to the rest of the props.
So that means if there is no value, we set the default. And yeah.
Yeah, I guess no value is passed.
Because it's uncontrolled. So
yeah. I guess what we can do then is
then that
really.
No. But shall we? I mean, this is yeah, aesthetically speaking, it would be good.
To be honest, I'm also fine with not making it gray for now and seeing how it's adopted first. And then we have an option to actually deselect something, which is also already a big step in the right direction, and see if we need to have a different design or need to have it look somehow differently.
Yeah, agreed.
All right.
I mean, this is
no
native.
Styling here.
So
yeah, very much so. So we can revert our example code and somehow add something to the documentation. I guess that would be under the behavior section, right? Unselect option. Or do you think we should refactor this whole documentation page to match our new styles?
I don't think so. Use clicked to the 0. Yeah.
All right, then we can just add something to this unselect option. When the placeholder is passed. Yeah, recently I learned that IntelliJ is very aggressive when it comes to using the passive voice. So it prefers using active voice. And I would be like using...
I'm curious how to write good technical documentation without passive voice, because I'm kind of helping one of the projects in the educational projects in Russia to write articles, and I review articles, and what I see, it's like we developers tend to use passive voice because we usually provide, so those are opportunities, not something that is kind of somebody does something. And here as well, this is like we describe an opportunity. So if you need this, let's see.
it's very difficult
to unselect.
Passing to unselect the selected option instead of the value sent to the onChange handler. Be there we are again. Empty string.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We'll add an example with this placeholder somewhere.
I don't think so, but we can add one right with this unselect option, right?
Mm-hmm.
Select label city.
I'm now thinking maybe to the playground or somewhere, but in general, we need to kind of review our documentation, and I would prefer to have these kind of sections with the examples that are rendered at the end, and you can both see and copy the code.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we can add this one to the to the example as well, to the playground below.
Yeah, why not?
And one last for good measure. Cool. So this will basically render the regular select with the special placeholder. Cool. And there we go. And now we have that moment of suspense. Well, for me, it's always a bit longer.
I also think that, okay, it looks like we don't have this table props table for the select at the moment. Yeah.
That's true. We don't have it here yet. Cool. There we go. Looks pretty good.
Shall we? I'm thinking, shall we drop it? The table.
You mean to just add it to this page?
Yeah.
Or
We usually,
right,
I think,
still have
add
a
it.
bit of time. Let's fix this documentation page as well. I guess technically this would now be fine. So we have an example and another examples, playground thing, and we have an section that describes what it does. The feature works. We've tested it. So far, so good, right?
Yeah.
All right, let me just commit them. Oh, we can just do it with the console as well. Because here it's big. View, and then we have the terminal. Great. And then we have the changes. Why is the package log changed? All right, never mind. Let's not commit that then. So, cool, these 3 files. And then we just commit that for now.
I think we can reuse table or either from button or headline. So just to copy and paste and replace with our properties.
Sounds good. Let's take the button whenever that opens. The button props table. Man, this presentation view has come quite a long way. I remember back in the days where only the font would get bigger and nothing else of the UI. So you would start having differently scaled things.
It sometimes still does that. So
So it's not perfect.
I mean, it's probably not the feature everybody use. So that's
It's true. That's true.
Are you scared of the GitHub Copilot already?
Taking my job?
Yeah.
Luckily, not really. I feel like code is still way too unique to have it like automated. I guess some things work. For example, if you want to import something, that should be more or less automatic. And I'm surprised it doesn't work everywhere yet. But there's so many things that are unique or unique problems where I don't think a machine learning algorithm is that far yet.
So there is a plugin called 9tap, I think. And it does this kind of smart auto-completion to your code. There is like a plugin in IntelliJ or in basically every IDE you can think of. And what it does, it's just kind of sits on top of the autocomplete and provides you more kind of 5 more options from kind of machine learning predictions. And sometimes it's fine.
That's kind of cool.
So, for example, like import if you're in the React project and you type import, and the first thing it offers you React from React. So some boilerplate, like for some boilerplate, it's very nice. But as well,
yeah,
like
that sounds good.
I don't see that it
you might
replaces
have to share that with
human.
me later.
With time, I started to hate it a bit because I don't know. It's not even sometimes. It's actually pretty precise, but I don't know why. I feel overwhelmed with these options. For example, I want one that comes from autocomplete, and there are 5 more not relevant. And autocomplete usually has, if for example you're in TypeScript, it's definitely way close to reality than the suggested ones, because like there is all this static analysis behind the scene, and like machine learning algorithm of course does not consider that.
Right, of course. I mean, machine learning does its own thing. It tries to learn from your code, I assume, and that can't compete with actual possibilities. So if the static code analysis says, hey, only this value can be there, but usually you call it differently, that's gonna be different.
Also, so for example, this 9tap, I think, as well as Google Copilot, they just use the whole GitHub code base to teach. And what machine learning algorithm does is just kind of reproducing these patterns. Then the more patterns is in the code base, more often you'll see that. So, I mean, let's not speak about the quality of GitHub repositories in whole. So there is like how many billions of repos, and I cannot say that all of them are in a good shape or has a good code.
That's very true. Very true. All right, I just finished up the props table with the 2 new props, or all the props basically. The variant size, inverted error label, and placeholder. Anything that we add specifically. And it should appear here somehow soon and look like all the other pages now.
But do we have all this additional things like variant? This we want to drop,
Yeah, we do also have the variant, for example. It's all in the input itself. So we have the variant, the inverted, error, and size. Do I have the size? In the actual input, and then we have additional props for the select props, which contains the label and stuff, like the label wrapper and all that. Because there is different styles for bottom lined and boxed, so we just extend the base styles. I just want to check if
But here, wait,
yeah,
the variant type is wrong.
Oh, right. Now that you mention it, of course, that's what I wanted to also update. So we have boxed and bottom lined and size small and medium. And the default is boxed. And no danger. All right, it still hasn't finished, so let's give it a moment. Cool, so props table is finished. While we're at it, we can probably also remove all this boilerplate code and replace it with this combinations component, which generates a lot of components for you.
I think you just dropped the playground, no?
Oh yeah, I noticed that as well. That was a bit too much. Too ambitious. All right, let's take it up until the playground. Call this one examples, because we do so everywhere else as well. A section on testing, and then we have combinations. And when we open the button documentation, we can copy this and of course the combinations.
Do you remember if there is an option to set up the grid for combinations, or it does it automatically?
It does it automatically. So I think it tries to fit everything where it's supposed to. We can just take a look at it. But what it does, it takes the props and does the grid automatically. So it is a display grid, and it will do some auto fitting and some spacing. And I think it worked for most components. Let's have a look how it looks with this. With this one. Right, just one small thing that we want to adjust. Give this one a little padding to the bottom. Cool, so we have, what do we start with? We start with boxed. Bottom line for the variant. We have sizes, medium and small. We have the inverted ones. What else makes sense to put into the variants? Maybe an error state?
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense to add the label and placeholder into this variations thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking like to drop something, maybe invert it or something that is maybe rarely used on, just to avoid this big blob of components on the bottom.
Yeah, I think if we leave it to 4, it's going to be, what is it, 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 variants. And this is kind of more or less, I think, used as a reference to kind of get all the options that we have. Let's just call it option 1. We don't need that many options. And option 2. Let's see how it looks. So at least we have the props table already with boxed and medium as the size and as the variant size. Things are looking good so far. And there we go. We have a props table.
It actually fits pretty well.
Yeah, so if you have more space, it also grows a bit more. So it will like go through all the props, starting with the defaults, basically boxed, size medium, no error, no inverted. And then we'll start going around and changing them from the back. So we'll add
when
an
you
arrow, add inverted.
when you do this, it's definitely a lot of value for us because I see styling issues and see if there is an error state, it goes a bit down. So I think that's because we need to set transparent border with like a same thickness as error border. So,
yeah, that's true. There is still some things, or at least having this overview also shows some visual issues. For example, this drop-down thing here.
yeah, a lot of stuff to fix. Okay, let's. It's a huge step forward today with the docs. Yeah, so let's do a pull request and commit everything and wrap it up.
Sounds good. Let's close this one out. Let's find the wrong tool. Let's find the terminal again.
And I think for the next week, the stream will be hosted by Alexis, and I don't know who will be the guest. Maybe Jonah again, maybe Luca, or we'll see. We'll see. I think it's up to Alexis to decide, but I think it's nice that we change people and see different ways of coding.
Yeah, you definitely get a different view each time. So, GitHub, there we go. Oh wait, I haven't pushed anything yet. Let's quickly do that. I push the changes, hope no tests break, and then it should appear right at the top. There we go. Cool. Should we also go through creating the pull request, or?
Yeah, let's create it and call it a day.
So yeah, I guess title pretty clear. What are we doing? We're adding a place for the select component. Closing. What is it? Do you know the number?
I think 12, or let me take a look. Not 12? Nope. Just a sec. Yeah. Okay, it is 11.
Almost. 11. Cool. Yeah, empty state. Closing 11. Cool. Why? The placeholder allows users to unselect an option in a select list. Cool. How? Well, I think we've answered that. And we can add a little screenshot on how it looks. I can even put a little GIF in it.
GIF or GIF?
I would say GIF. But I don't want to be...
I don't know actually anyone who says GIF. But I don't know what is the discussion. It's like, have you seen those people? But maybe there are.
Maybe they really are there.
It's like maybe this is one of the culture fit question to FreeNow. Like, what do you say?
Well, that didn't work. Yeah, what do you say? It's very funny. One of the questions I always ask in meeting the teams is how do people, or are people okay with emojis? What's their stance on emojis, basically? And it's always interesting to get the different answers. Some are like, yay, it's all cool. Others are like, yeah, I'll use it, I guess, if I have to. It's really from the range is quite broad on answers that you get.
Yeah. I don't know what I would answer. It's like, I'm okay if it's not too much, I think. Like with everything.
True. With everything. If it's too much, it doesn't make any sense. But the right amount is good. Cool.
Yeah, but
So we
for
have a
example,
pull request.
cool. What do you think about, there is a kind of movement or approach to, instead of doing this feature chore test, people do emoji for that. So I don't recall the name of this approach, but it's like emoji commit something.
Oh, very interesting. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, it is
I
called
guess one of the reasons
gitmoji
is that it Gitmoji
dot dev.
feels like this is making it more complicated. I guess having emojis in your commit messages is fine as long as they don't need to convey like anything. I don't know if
Yeah,
you do like a cool fix or something, you can do sparkles or whatever. But at the end, not at the beginning.
yeah. I don't know. I feel like I don't know why. Maybe this is like my perception that programmers sometimes, like a kid, they're very like happy to do this rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah, that's true. I have to admit, I'm not sure if you could just see that, but I have
Yeah,
rainbows in my IDE as well. It's a break from the tedious black and white, right?
I
Black and
actually
white.
have. Yeah, to me, I'm a bit less. I'm gonna stop sharing your screen, so there is only split view now, so you can see you and me,
All
and we
right,
have
cool.
3 views. Yeah, I have, for example, um, instead of this cursor, when you have like a finger tapping on the links, there is an extension called foot it, I think, and instead of this finger, you have a foot that does the same. And it's very
All
funny. I
right.
laughed so hard for first day I installed it. Now it's kind of, I don't really notice it anymore, but it's fun.
Oh, that's kind of nice. Absolutely.
Okay,
Cool.
then we're very precise with timing today, and
Absolutely. We
nice
still have
that
15 more minutes, right?
I think I put our meeting till 16:50, so
All
that's
right.
uh,
You're absolutely on time. Amazing.
yeah. Because last time we tried to address TypeScript issues, TypeScript types with Alexis, and spent hour and a half without any luck, or like changing a lot of code, but we haven't really finished. But yeah, today it's another +1 pull request, which is super nice. And I hope the next week we're gonna bring one more. And apart from all of those that coming outside of the stream, and yeah, so
Yeah,
thank you,
absolutely.
Jana, for joining. That was a good exercise. A lot of learning from my side. A lot of HTML select specs and styles. So we learned that
Absolutely.
CSS is
Yeah,
not
thanks for
perfect.
having me.
Okay,
No,
so next
CSS
week,
is a pain.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah,
So
thanks for
next
having me. It's been a pleasure. Next week.
mm, next week, Alexis will do the stream, and we'll see who will be the co-host. And yeah, see you, folks, soon. Ciao.
All right. See ya. Bye.